hearing to order. So, welcome to this virtual hearing of the Committee on Foreign Relations, joined with the other committees. So, let me first acknowledge the presence of my Vice Chairman is present, no? Senator Tolentino is here.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Senator Marcos is also here. And let me check the Senator Villar, is she present?
Yes, sir. And
Senator-
Senator Risa.
And Senator Risa Ontiveros. Senator Risa, you will leave the hearing earlier, no? Is that's what I heard?
I can try and stay for
Sige.
as long as possible, Mr.
Thank-
Chair. Salamat po.
Thank you, ma'am. So, given the number of senators present, we definitely have a quorum. So this afternoon, we will be taking up 7 resolutions and 1 privilege speech, the one given by Senator Francis Tolentino on the Coast Guard law of the People's Republic of China. According to the reports, and that's why we're having this hearing, so that we will be given better information. This recent law, PROC law, allows its Coast Guard under certain circumstances to fire on foreign vessels by using handheld or ship and airborne weapons in order to defend China's maritime rights and interests. According to the same reports, the law also authorizes the Coast Guard to demolish other countries' structures built on reefs and islands claimed by China and to seize or order foreign vessels illegally entering China's territorial waters to leave. And this law was passed on January 22, 2021 and has come into force and effect last February 1, 2021. So the committee would also like to be updated on the diplomatic protest filed by the Secretary of Foreign Affairs on this issue and on the status of the China and Southeast Asian nations negotiations on establishing a regional code of conduct. Matagal na po natin itong naririnig, which is meant to discourage aggression or misencounters or the rising of tensions in the disputed area. We would also want to be updated on the matters that are the subject of the following resolutions pending before the Foreign Relations Committee. Some may have been already resolved by the DFA, but this is the hearing precisely called for the DFA to update the committee and the Senate as well, and the other agencies concerned. No? So first is about the illegally imported plastic wastes which landed in Mindanao, allegedly from South Korea. That's PS resolution number 77. The condition of the 12 Filipino seafarers arrested by Iran who may still be in Iran. PS resolution number 130. There's also a resolution on the visa pan-arrival policy for Chinese nationals. This PS resolution number 309. There's also a resolution that we review our stand on UN Human Rights Council's resolutions concerning atrocities committed against the Rohingyas. This is PS resolution number 158. And there's also a resolution relating to the attempt to sell Philippine properties in Japan. PS resolution 535. And then resolution concerning the ecologically destructive activities in the West Philippine Sea. PS resolution 369. And there's also the proposal to support the Indian and South African resolutions before the WTO to suspend the relevant provisions of the TRIPS agreement. That's PS resolution 560. So in addition po yan sa privilege speech of Senator Tolentino. So we have our resource persons present online to enlighten us, share their knowledge, update us on the status of the matters that I have just mentioned. So for the record and for our information, I ask the committee secretary now to recognize who are the resource persons present and ready to participate in our hearing this afternoon. So, Madam Committee Secretary, please.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chair. We also have, sir, Senator Pia Cayetano on board.
Welcome to Senator Pia Cayetano. I'm sorry kasi yung yung screens dito, I only see 6 faces. I cannot see everyone. Sige, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm just going to be listening anyway. No need to see my face.
Sige, go ahead, Committee Secretary.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have today, of course, the Secretary who will follow later, Secretary Teodoro L. Locsin Jr., Undersecretary Lourdes Iparaguirre of the Office of the Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and International Economic Relations, with Special Assistant Christine Lailani Salye, Director Anthony Aguirre, and Bien Janine Balocati. From the Office of the Undersecretary for Civilian Security and Consular Affairs, we have Undersecretary Brigido Dulay. From the Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs, we have Undersecretary Sara Lu Ariola and Assistant Secretary Enrico Foss. From the Office of the Strategic Communications and Research, we have Undersecretary Ernesto Abella. From the Office of Consular Affairs, we have Assistant Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro, Director Pamela Durian Bailon, Principal Assistant Maria Isobel Pareja. And from the Office of the Asia Pacific Affairs, we have Assistant Secretary Nathaniel Imperial, Director Rafael Hermoso, Acting Director Rachel Ann Oronce, and Principal Assistant Eloisa Katrina Madamba from the Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs, Acting Director Juan Carlos Borromeo, and from the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office, we have Assistant Secretary Igor Bailen, Director Roderico Atienza, Acting Director John Francis Herrera. From the Office of Asset Management and Support Services of the DFA, we have Assistant Secretary Medardo Macaraig, Executive Director Gerardo Abiog, Acting Director Joy Ann Lai. From the United Nations and other international organizations, we have Assistant Secretary Roberto Manalo, Director Jesus Enrique Garcia. And again, from the Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs, we have Attorney Andrea Lecano with Principal Assistant Madamba. And of course, from the Liaison Office, we have Acting Head Attorney Voltaire Mauricio, Deputy Legislative Liaison Officer Andre Bauzon, and Legislative Liaison Specialist Joarlene Espiritu. From the Department of Health, we have Dr. Joel H. Benaventura of the Bureau of International Health Cooperation, Dr. Cheryl Garcia Gavino from the Women and Men's Health Division, under the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau, and Legislative Liaison Mr. Mike Aguinaldo. From the Department of Justice, we have Senior State Counsel Freti Ganchoon, State Counsel Paulito de Jesus, and State Counsel Mary Grace Quintana. From the Department of Labor and Employment, we have Assistant Secretary Dominic Tutay. From the Department of Trade and Industry, we have Assistant Secretary Alan Hepty. From the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, Director General Roel Barba, Attorney Lolibeth Medrano, Attorney Nathaniel Arevalo, and Attorney Maria Katrina Rivera. From the Bureau of International Trade Relations, we have Marie Sherilyn Akia and Ms. Raiza Faminal. And of course, Ms. Irene Forcadilla of the Lola. From the DENR, we have Mr. Joaquin Silvestre from the Coastal and Marine Division. We have Ms. Shaira Cerezo from the Policy Studies Division and Mr. Nico Dalusong. And DNRLLO, Miss Sylvia Villalobos. From the from the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have Captain Nidia Carla Yoro, Colonel Niceforum Diaz. And from the Philippine National Police, we have Police Brigadier General Debold Sinas, the Chief of Police, and accompanied by Major General Alfred Corpus, Brigadier General Albert Ignatius Ferro, Brigadier General Ronaldo Olay, Brigadier General Alessandro Abella, Colonel Owen Andarino, Colonel Arthur Llamas, Colonel Reynorio de Chavez, and Major Conraluz Tang. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have Vice Admiral Leopoldo Laroya, Captain Fedelin Santos, Captain Allen Dalangin, Captain Mitzi Campos. From the Department of National Defense, we are expecting Undersecretary Arnel Duco, Assistant Secretary Teodoro Cirilo Toralba. From the National Coast Watch Council, we have Undersecretary Joel Garcia. From the Bureau of Immigration, we have Commissioner Jaime Morente. From the Commission on Human Rights, we have Attorney Erwin Caliba. And from the Third World Network and Trade Justice Filipinas, we have Attorney Tony Salvador. We also have Dr. Melissa Loja, an UNCLOS expert with the Philippine Coast Guard. Sir, we are also expecting resource persons from the National Bureau of Investigation and the Bureau of Customs, but we don't have their names yet po.
So thank you. Okay na, Committee
Those are
Secretary.
the ones. Yes, sir.
So thank you. So just a few house rules. Number one, I cannot see all of you, and I cannot memorize all your names. So just call my attention if you want to speak, no, and be heard, no. Then please identify yourself, and then since we have varied topics, so if your concern is finished and you want to leave the meeting, just please inform the committee secretary. Okay ba yun, committee secretary? They'll just inform you. Do they know your number or any
Yes, sir.
other way to...
They can
Yes,
write
please.
sa chat.
So for
Sir,
example,
may I just include, sir? I'm sorry. May I just include the Philippine Coast Guard? I think I missed them.
sige, go ahead.
Vice Admiral Leopoldo Laroya, Captain Fedelin Santos, Captain Allen Dalangin, and Captain Mitzi Campo po. Thank you, sir.
So thank you for all of you for attending our hearing. I know you're here for some of you for specific topics. So ganun na lang gawin po natin once the specific topic is over. You can just ask or inform our committee secretary that you want to leave na. You have to leave and go ahead. So, but please accept my advance thanks to all of you for participating. So can we start? So let's start first with the easier ones, those which may be mutan academic na. We just need to be updated so that the committee will know how to dispose of the matter. So can we go to PS Resolution number 77, calling for the return of illegally imported plastic wastes allegedly from South Korea. I think this arrived in Pivedec Estate in Mindanao. So may we have the comments from the DFA, please, if you know the status of this subject matter?
Thank you very much, the Honorable Chair. My name is Neil Imperial. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Asian and Pacific Affairs Office of the DFA. And first of all, we would like to commend the sponsor of the resolution for his concern for environmental protection. and the fulfillment of our obligations in the Basel Accord, to which the Philippines is a party, as well as the implementation of our environmental laws. On the issue of the shipment of waste from the Republic of Korea, all household wastes shipped to Misamis Oriental have already been re-exported back to the Republic of Korea as of September 2020. This includes more than 5,000 metric tons of wastes, and none of the wastes now remain in the Philippines. And the Philippines, the department supports the stringent implementation of Philippine laws on the movement of hazardous wastes, including Republic Act 10863, the Customs Modernization and Tariff Act, and the Toxic Substances and Hazardous and Nuclear Wastes Control Act. And as the present case demonstrates, the Bureau of Customs and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources have an important and principal role to play in regulating and barring from entry potential hazardous materials from overseas. And the present case actually involves shipment of materials between private parties and not government entities, as well as the enforcement of Philippine laws by the relevant agencies. And so the DFA would like to commend the Bureau of Customs and the DNR, and they certainly deserve recognition for their vigilance and vigorous enforcement of Philippine laws. And we thank them for the excellent coordination between them, which we facilitated with the Korean Embassy in Manila. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, ASIC Imperial, no? ASIC Imperial. Thank you. So, according to
Yes, sir.
Chair,
who's that? Who's this one?
Amy, sorry.
Okay, Senator Marcos, please.
Yes, by way of information, I would like the chair to consider the fact that there are several bills pending, among them my Senate bill number 408, dealing with the same subject matter and imposing a total ban on the importation of waste and its byproducts. Kasi itong South Korean, ikalawa na to, yung mas notorious, Canadian. I think a series of 6 shipments between 2013 and 2014. So siguro part of our committee's conclusion could also be an endorsement of those bills pending. Recyclable scrap, F. Yun ang disguise nito. And as we know, there are at least 3 companies in operation in Cagayan de Oro as well as in Subic undergoing so-called recycling. So yun ang tawag nila, yun ang cover. So we have to be very, very careful, and we have banned together with the other bills pending by the minority leader and other senators, everything from scrap metals to metal tailings, plastic materials, electronic assemble and BOF, solid plastic waste, infectious waste, used oil, nuclear, fly ash, etc. So I'd like the committee to take cognizance also of these bills. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I also filed a similar bill. Is that Senator Tolentino?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, Mr. Chairman, just a point of inquiry. Earlier on, you made a committee directive that this is going to be a come and go, or if you're finished, the resource persons can leave. My inquiry will center on the exact role of the PNP vis-a-vis the role of the Coast Guard, because I foresee that my resolution will be tackled last, the China Coast Guard law. So there is an existing Philippine National Police Maritime Command. So how would this overlap with the functions of Coast Guard? If there is no overlap, we may ask the PNP to leave pursuant to your directive, or if they're relevant to that resolution that I filed, perhaps the chief PNP can leave one officer join the discussion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino. We are requesting the PNP to stay up to the very end. And the person to stay should be knowledgeable about the points to be raised by Senator Tolentino, the PNP Maritime Division ba tawag doon, sir?
Maritime Command.
Maritime Command. Sige. Thank you for that, Senator Tolentino. So according to the resolution, what we're still taking up, no, PS 77, the waste declared as plastic synthetic flakes arrived in July 2018, and it was discovered in November 2018 that it actually contained plastic waste. So that means somebody checked, di ba? May I know para makita natin yung system natin. So it arrived, nakalusot, it landed on Philippine soil and territory because it was found siguro in a compound of one locator in that industrial estate. Who checked and who found out the true nature of the shipment? July, August, September, October, after 4 months, para malaman natin yung sistema natin to prevent similar incidents in the future. Asik Neil, do you know? Do you know what happened here?
We do not have the complete details, but if there is a representative from the Bureau of Customs,
Okay, Customs.
this was handled by Bureau of Customs District 10.
Is the representative of Customs knowledgeable about the facts concerning this particular shipment? Actually, ko-commend namin kayo for finding out, di ba? But after 4 months, so we will look at the system. How sana if the true nature of the shipment was discovered earlier, so the appropriate action would have been done earlier. Is Customs present, Scomsec?
Yes, sir, we have. We invited the customs, sir.
Sino
But
nga?
they're not yet on board, sir.
Not yet online. Sige,
Opo, opo.
just call them and then ito na lang
Yes,
last.
sir.
Siguro if there are no other questions from my fellow senators, but last question to ASIC Imperial and to all the others listening, maybe the PNP can also contribute here. Is there a global waste trade, and is the Philippines in the radar of these global waste traders? Kasali na ba tayo sa sindikatong ito? Ano po ang masasabi ninyo sa amin? DFA, do we
Yes,
know? You have a
Mr.
macro
Yes.
point of view.
Yes, Honorable Chair, what we do know is that this has been the practice of many developed countries to dump their wastes to developing countries. And developing countries, some of them accept them legally because they recycle. It's cheaper to recycle them in developing countries. But for illegal waste, those that have been misdeclared, I think it's a problem not just for the Philippines, but also for our neighboring countries such as Malaysia and even Indonesia. So we're, I think, Your Honor, of many countries, especially in Africa, who are recipients of these misdeclared toxic wastes and household wastes.
Mr. Chair, but haven't these countries, including Indonesia and Malaysia, already banned such dumping sites and disallowed the exportation to these countries? Wala na kasi sila sa listahan, tayo hindi pa nagbaban eh.
Did you get the question, ASEC Imperial, if you can react? Did you hear Senator Marcos?
Yes, ASEC Imperial,
ASEC,
to
ASEC.
our best knowledge,
But
Malaysian
Mr. Chair,
Indonesia,
I think
China have banned.
the main issue is that it was misdeclared.
I see.
Yes,
So we're aware that
yes,
in
I heard the good senator, Your Honor.
I see. Yes, we're also aware that there was a bilateral talk between the two countries as early as December 2018. So where is
Your
this
Honor, that's
waste
correct. However,
where is the waste located now? How is it being stored? And what is the timeline for the re-exportation?
Senator Amy, can you hear
Yes,
me?
po.
yes.
From
Okay.
from the initial.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. According to the data provided to us by the Bureau of Customs, it was exported in July. Yes.
Your ASEC Imperial, you told us last September 2020, all of the trash from South Korea already sent back to South Korea. Tama po ba yon?
Yes, that's what I understood.
September 2020. Okay, anyway, that is what...
Anyway, yes.
Mr. Chair, point of information.
Your
Sorry, I
Honor, that's
missed that.
correct. This is the information provided.
Okay, Senator Amy, okay lang? Senator Risa will intervene. Okay, Senator Risa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Ami. Point of information lang po, Mr. Chair, kay ASEC Neil, who paid for the re-exportation nito pong illegally imported plastic waste?
Thank you very much for that question, Madam Senator. It was the Korean government that paid for the shipment of the waste back to Korea. However, it was the Philippine government that paid for the packaging into containers of the plastic wastes, of the household wastes. So it was the Korean government that paid for the re-export, Madam Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, ASEC. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further clarification lang, well, I'm glad to know na ibinayad po ng South Korean government yung re-exportation. That is as it should be. Pero bakit po gobyerno natin nagbayad sa packaging? Is that the current practice for re-exportation, even of illegally imported waste?
I think ASEC Imperial is offline. ASEC, did you hear the question of Senator Ontiveros? ASEC Imperial?
Sir, we also have from the ASPAC, Director Rafael Hermoso and Acting Director Rachel Ann Oronce. Maybe they can also answer.
Yes, Yes, Honorable Chair, I heard.
Sige, sir.
Yes.
ASEC muna, ASEC Imperial. If you know the
Yes,
answer, go ahead.
Yes, I heard it. Yes, Mr. Chair, I heard the question. As far as we know, there was negotiations between the Philippine government and the Korean government to assist in resolving this issue because it was a private sector export. You know, it was a transaction between two private entities and not government entities. Just to resolve the problem, we were able to persuade the Korean government to pay for the re-export back to Korea, and as part of our contribution, we were able to source funds for. As far as we know, we were able to source funds for the packaging of the wastes. So the cost involved packaging of the wastes and storing them and cleaning the dump site, the area where they were stored.
Thank you, ASEC. Thank you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate na nakagawa ng solusyon yung parehong gobyerno natin at ng South Korea. Although still, kahit pa po private sector South Korean company ang may sala, I think the more ideal situation pa rin ay yung South Korean government pa rin ang gumastos para sa packaging. In any case, salamat po for the information. Just a last follow-up, Mr. Chair, in terms of seeking the accountability of the offending party. Was there at least a case filed against that private South Korean company?
Yes, Madam Senator, yes, that's correct. A case has been filed in the local court in Misamis Oriental against the exporters of the waste products, and a warrant of arrest has already been issued against them. And also, they have been included in the Interpol watch list so that they could be arrested if found. So there is a pending case, Your Honor.
Salamat po, ASEC. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair, at maraming salamat din po kay Sen. Amy.
Yes, thank you very much. Perhaps in the process of making the private ship companies or ship owners liable for these cargoes in violation of our environmental and customs laws, perhaps the resource persons who are here can also recommend amendments or revision of laws when necessary para magawa natin ng paraan na higpitan ang ating mga batas tungkol dito. Kasi ang tagal 2 taon, nag-bilateral talks pa katakot-takot na contamination yan. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marcos. Thank you, ASEC. And that's why I also filed a bill similar to yours, because there are cover stories being done, like waste to energy, tapos isa recycling. Ipagbawal na natin yan kasi ang nangyayari, that is the cover story to allow entry into our territory of waste, and then papatulugin na. Therefore, naging basurahan tayo, pinatulog papatulugin ng 5 hanggang 10 taon, di naging basurahan tayo. So this is
Senator Pimentel, we know that we are very aware that there are very profitable factories, so-called recycling plants, so-called in Subic and Cagayan de Oro, that do nothing but process this waste or upcycle and recycle them. Kaya dapat maingat tayo because it spawned a whole new industry.
Policy decision na lang siguro, ma'am. Policy decision na. I mean, will we allow this or not? And if we allow this, there will be loopholes that they will be taking advantage of. So I think my question now to the DFA, which you need not answer, but I'm just telling you that this committee is always open for your inputs and for your information. If you notice that there is a global waste trade syndicate operating and the Philippines is part of the system, and just tell us, because we will now prompt our investigative agencies to find out who are the partners of these global waste traders. Kasi bawal po talaga yan, but imposible nangyari yun na walang partner dito, walang promotor. Imposible po. So if are there any other comments on PS Resolution 77? Because if none, we will now move on. But I think we are ready to report this out, ComSec. We will report this out to the extent of the information that we got this afternoon. And then we will link the committee report to the pending bills on importation of waste, prohibiting these acts, and then endorsing the said bills.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's our disposition of PS Resolution 77. Can we now go to PS Resolution number 130, filed by Senator Tolentino, on the condition of the 12 Filipino seafarers arrested by Iran. Are they still in Iran? Because I think this happened.
Yes.
When did this happen?
2019, Mr. Chair.
2009. Oh, Senator Tolentino,
Yes,
if you
Mr.
want
Chair.
to make a statement about this, go ahead.
I think probably this was already overtaken by events, and we can clarify this from the DFA. If indeed the Filipinos were already released, my point here, our point here should be to prevent a repetition of the same incident, because prior to this, there were exchanges between the government of the Philippines and the Islamic Republic of Iran relative to the exchange of prisoners. They were contemplating an exchange of prisoner system. So we might as well ask the DFA what happened and what happened to this uh, proposed exchange of prisoners between Iran and the Philippines. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, DFA, I'm sure you took care of our kababayans who were affected. So please, DFA, can you tell us what happened to them? 12 lang ba sila o mas marami pa?
We have
Mr. Ch-
Undersecretary Ariola.
Mr. Chair,
Sarah, please, Sarah.
yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, Mr. Chair, actually all the 12 prisoners returned already in December 2019 and January 2020. The DFA was able to secure, to get them a lawyer, and we paid using our legal assistance funds $48,000 to provide them counsel. Unfortunately, two of them were convicted for fuel smuggling, and they were fined. And the fine was also paid for by the DFA for $178,156,935. All of them were met by the Secretary last January 10, 2020, and we gave each of them 50,000 pesos for financial assistance, Your Honor.
Senator Tolentino, you have a follow-up question?
What about my second question, Undersecretary? What happened to the proposed Philippines-Iran exchange of prisoners system?
Your Honor, I would like to refer to that question to our Assistant Secretary of OTLA, ASEC Igor Bailen, Your Honor.
Is ASEC Bailen online?
Yes, sir.
ASEC Igor, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Your Honors. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am not sure if our colleagues in the proper geographic office are here, but the Department of Foreign Affairs, of course, is working with the Department of Justice towards the negotiation of a transfer of sentenced persons agreement with Islamic Republic of Iran, and will can revert shortly to the committee on the status of the talks, if we can start negotiating with the Iranian side. Of course, we have the pandemic right now, so it's become more challenging because of that. But we'll surely work on that and get back to this committee right away, and we'll be in touch to follow up work with our colleagues at DOJ. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, just a
Yes.
quick
Yes, go ahead.
follow-up. I think it's not the DOJ who's in charge here, but the Department of Foreign Affairs. Last January 31, 2016, they conducted a 6th joint consular consultation meeting. It's a consultative meeting between the foreign affairs of our foreign affairs and our counterpart in Tehran. So I think it's lodged with the Department of Foreign Affairs, not the Department of Justice. Because if it's the Department of Justice, it's on a case-to-case basis. What I'm referring to is an institutionalized system initiated by the two foreign ministries. And again, I repeat, 2016, they had the 6th consular meeting, joint consular meeting. So I'm just trying to make a follow-up to prevent again a similar incident as what transpired in the Strait of Hormuz.
Any reaction from the DFA? Senator Tolentino, prisoner exchange is a proper subject matter of a treaty, right? If I
Yes, yes,
understand it correctly, it must be governed by a treaty.
yes, Mr. Chair. So this was already started. Naka-anim na sila. So hindi pa ho kasali dito yung DOJ. Siguro DOJ pag meron ng implementation. So ang tanong ko lang po, ano nang nangyari? Nagkaroon ba ng 7th meeting, 8th meeting, etc.?
Sige, Asek Bailen, were you raising your hand?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Your Honors. Of course, the negotiation on a transfer of sentence persons agreement, that would be a bilateral agreement between the Iran and the Philippines, and DOJ and the DFA would be partners in that negotiation on a bilateral agreement. But with respect to the specific question of the good Senator Tolentino on prisoner swap, the matter has in fact been referred to the DOJ, and the last information we have from the DOJ is that this prisoner swap negotiations, which could take place outside a TSPA or a transfer of sentence person agreement, because it could be negotiated diplomatically between the two countries. The last information is that DOJ had referred the matter to the Board of Pardons and Parole, Your Honor. So that's the latest information I have. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so okay na, Senator Tolentino. We can leave the subject matter. Sige, okay. As far as PS Resolution number 130, over the 12 Filipino seamen arrested by Iran, they're all back here in the Philippines. That is the report that we get. So the committee will make a report to this effect, given the information that we got this afternoon. Pero siguro in connection with the subject matter of the resolution, can the committee request the Department of Foreign Affairs to give us an updated list of, if we know, and I think we should know, the number of Filipinos held in foreign jails, prisons, or incarcerated abroad? At least malaman man lamang ng committee natin. Okay, so because the effort to have the 12 Filipino seamen released by Iran should be the same effort that we will exert for all of our kababayans incarcerated or in jail abroad. Okay, so just give us at least some information, ilan po ito at saka saan.
Yes,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Yes, thank you, Yusek Sara. If there are no more questions or inputs regarding PS 130, we will now leave it. Can we now go to, can we go to PS 309 by Senator Binay, Visa Upon Arrival Policy for Chinese Nationals? I think Commissioner Morente is present, no? So, andyan ba siya?
Yes, sir. Nandiyan po si Commissioner.
Immigration. Can you tell us, Commissioner, can you tell us what this Visa Upon Arrival is all about? And what is the status now?
Asan na?
Baka nagpaalam na si Commissioner. Balikan na lang na.
I just went to the restroom.
Ayan, okay, Commissioner. Sige. Did you hear us, Commissioner?
I can hear you, sir.
PS Resolution 309 by Senator Binay.
Yes, sir.
Subject matter is the visa upon arrival for Chinese nationals. So,
Yes, sir.
ang question is ano na status nito? Anong nangyari rito? Na-abuse ba? And then, for Chinese, yung concept of visa upon arrival is only for Chinese nationals lang ba? So please, okay. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yes, sir. Honorable Chairman, sir, the visa upon arrival program, which is a joint agreement between the Department of Tourism and the Department of Justice. The implementing circular provided to us for implementation is Department Circular number 41. And at present, sir, this only pertains to Chinese nationals, sir. The visa upon arrival is only for Chinese nationals. and at present it is suspended since January 28, 2020. And basically, this is, I think, for the promotion of tourism as envisioned by the former Secretary of Tourism, Secretary Juan Mateo, in consultation with Secretary Aguirre, the former Secretary of Justice.
What did you say, sir? Suspended? Did you say suspended or suspended?
It is suspended, sir,
Suspended.
in January 23 when I heard of the virus circulation during a DOH meeting, January 23, 2020. I immediately suspended the implementation of the visa upon arrival for Chinese nationals for Wuhan. 5 days after, sir, I recommended to the Secretary of Justice and was granted permission to suspend visa upon arrival for Chinese for the whole of China on January 28, 2021.
So at least naklaro no, the visa upon arrival is a special arrangement we made for Chinese PROC nationals. Tama po ba 'yon?
Correct, Your Honor, PROC.
PROC. Did we even ask for reciprocity? Does PROC extend visa upon arrival for Filipino nationals?
We did not have any reciprocity, sir. For Filipinos going to China, they must secure an appropriate visa, entry visa.
Okay, so looks like kung wala reciprocity, this was not requested of us no by PROC. So initiative natin ito. Siguro
I would presume, sir, it is the program of the former Secretary of Tourism on the day.
Oo nga. Kaya nga, somebody thought of it dito sa Pilipinas that, okay, let's make this a marketing tool or a tool to entice them to visit us. But, Commissioner, is there a legal basis for the immigration, BID, to grant visa upon arrival?
Sir, the legal basis for the implementation of this visa upon arrival was the Department of Justice Circular number 41, dated sometime September 2017, Your Honor. August 17, 2017, Your Honor.
Okay. Basta from your point of view, you made as legal basis DOJ Circular number 41 dated August 2017. Okay. Sige po.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
At least klaro yan na from your point of view, you have legal basis. So it's a matter of us also going over your legal basis. So basta the factual statement is as of now, suspended yan. Walang visa upon arrival. Pero suspended lang, meaning to say at any time the program can be revived.
Yes, Your Honor, because the PI is not the proper authority to cancel the visa upon arrival program since it was an order coming from the Department of Justice.
Okay, so the decision maker on whether the program should continue, be suspended, or be scrapped is the Department of Justice Secretary. Tama po ba yun?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so I think the Secretary is here. Yes, Senator Ontiveros.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, additional points of information po tungkol sa mga paksa touched upon by Senator Nancy's resolution number 309. Ito pong visas upon arrival, naging subject din po ng inquiry ng Committee on Women, simula po dun sa POGO-related prostitution, tumawid po sa Pastilla Scheme, hanggang dito po sa VUA, at patapos na po on the issue of human trafficking palabas naman ng ating bansa. And just for the record, Mr. Chairman, tama po, totoo po yung sinabi ni Commissioner Morente, currently suspended po yung pag-issue ng mga VUA. Pero in one previous hearing, sinabi din po ni Senate Minority Leader Frank Drilon na pag isusulat na namin yung aming committee report at recommendations tungkol dito, ire-recommenda nila na i-scrap na lang natin yung VUA para wala ng special treatment sa mga Chinese nationals kahit hindi sila nakakuha ng proper visa sa ating mga embassies at consulates abroad, at para din lalo rin para hindi maabuso itong VUA para makapasok ang mga undesirable aliens na nakakapagkalat pa ng lagim dito sa ating bansa through various crimes, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record po, salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros. If the
Mr.
DOJ
Chair?
Secretary is not online, is he online? Is he with us? Wala. Comsec? Secretary Guevara is not with us.
Sir, he's not with us, sir.
Ah.
We have 3 state councils from the DOJ po.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Marcos.
Hi, yes, thank you. And I accompanied Senator Risa in the investigations in the Committee on Women, including the expose on the Pastillas scam, where it was revealed that the VUA is suspended. The same information was shared with us during the POGO investigations in the Committee on Labor. So talagang suspended po yan bago pa mag-COVID lockdown. Ngunit ngayon, with the same logic na talagang COVID ang dahilan, ano po yung status? Kasi ang pagkaalam ko, it's not just China that has visa upon arrival or the right to stay for 30 days automatically upon entry into the Philippines. There's over 100 countries that have the same privilege, and included among them are those with heavy COVID infection. So by the same logic, why is the UK, France, Italy, and Spain still, for example, allowed automatic 30 days stay? And then on the other hand, nababasa rin natin yung mga prohibitions na bawal pumasok. May mga banned countries na mahigit kumulang 20 na. So medyo nalilito na ako sa status nitong mga iba't ibang pribilehyo at ban na ito.
Sige, Commissioner Morente, help us understand.
Yes, Your Honor, the visa privilege arrangement with all concerned countries, around 167 if I'm not mistaken, has been suspended by the DFA. As such, there are only certain foreign nationals through the IATF resolutions given exemption, more particularly those married to Filipinos, for the case of the US, those balikbayan. Ito lang po yung mga exemptions given by the department, the IATF. There are also some from countries na restricted nationals, but they are allowed entry, such as those mga technicians that are given exemption by the DFA, and these are the only persons that Bureau of Immigration allows to enter Europe.
Thank you very much. Nagkakalituhan lang kasi pabago-bago rin. Yung iba, halimbawa, yung mga returning, repatriated OFW, kapag may foreign husband o may foreign children, bawal yung foreign children, pero yung nanay pwedeng bumalik. Medyo nagkakalituhan, kaya siguro i-publicize natin at himayin natin maigi. Thank you.
So, okay, so
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Marcos took advantage of our hearing this afternoon to relay to our concerned agencies, DFA, BID. Since you're members of the IATF din naman, so please ano tawag, re-echo whatever has been stated this afternoon. Sige, teka, Senator Risa, sandali. Commissioner Morente is raising his hand back.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner, please.
Yes, Your Honor. In our social media page, we continuously publish the changing IATF resolutions treating the exemptions, Your Honor, kasi from time to time, the IATF changes the travel restrictions. Gaya nga ho nung lumabas yung bagong UK strain, pati yung sinabi ni Ma'am Senator Amy na mga children and husband were not allowed unless they are traveling with the Filipino returning residents. So this is also being communicated in DFA advisories, Your Honor. And I'm pretty sure that these are published in their respective consulates. Aside from sa amin sa Bureau of Immigration, in our social page, it is being published, Your Honor.
Thank you. Senator Risa? Senator Risa?
Salamat, Mr. Chair. Dagdag lang po ng mga points of information kaugnay ng Senate Resolution 309 ni Sen. Nancy in the context din po ng dagdag na information ni Sen. Amy. Totoo po, there are other nationals to whom may ini-issue na visas upon arrival. Ang particular interest po nitong mga VUA for Chinese nationals ay apparently, ayon sa mga resource persons namin sa Committee on Women, sa halip na sinisingil ng on average 1,800 for a VUA issued to any other national, di umano sa Chinese nationals, ang VUA, nung ini-issue pa, sinisingila ng anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 pesos each. Kaya may tansya po sa ongoing at patapos na inquiry na it could have been 11 billion pesos upwards ang na-generate sa ganitong misuse ng VUA. And bahagi po yon ng tinetest na theory, pinapatunayan na theory na ito yung ginamit para sa kickbacks. So yun po, dagdag, Mr. Chair, yung pagpapahalaga ko dito sa Senate Resolution number 309 ni Sen. Nancy. Salamat po, Mr. Chair.
Senator Risa, pardon me if I was not able to hear everything you said. I got cut off. Sorry, the chairman got cut off.
It's all right, Mr. Chair.
Ambassador, who's raising her hand? Lazaro?
Asek Teresa Lazaro po.
Yes, Asek Lazaro, please.
My classmate, Tess Lazaro.
Hello, Ms. Senator Ivy, how are you?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to tell you that as far as the issue is concerned on this visa waiver, please be informed that the Department of Foreign Affairs is against this particular scheme. At the same time, but in fact, we want to terminate it as soon as the appropriate time comes. However, it is also this visa upon waiver. I mean, waiver is rather arrival visa arrival upon visa arrival is also in the form of a department, or rather an executive order. As such, it is of course if it is the view of the executive that it will be rescinded, then we will abide by it. But that is the position taken by the Department of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So if there are no more inputs on this subject matter, we will report it out, but limit it, Senator Risa, we will limit the committee report, we'll limit it to the facts gathered this afternoon, the legal basis given to us, the position of the DFA. We will not touch on the allegations in the Binay resolution about whether or not it contributed to the rise of Chinese-operated sex dens, because the other committee, the committee of Senator Ontiveros and Senator Marcos, have investigated this subject matter more thoroughly. So, okay, so that will now be the report of this committee. We will just limit it to the legal basis for us to debate in the plenary kung tama ba yung legal basis o hindi, plus position of the DFA.
That's perfectly all right, Mr. Chairman. Salamat po. I appreciate na pinagsusumikapan po natin that our separate and parallel committee reports will seek to complement each other at magtulungan para to come up with an even more coherent policy framework overall. Salamat po.
So thank you. We will now leave PS Resolution 309. Let's move on to PS Resolution 158. This is filed by Senator De Lima naman to, urging the Executive Department to reconsider the government's position on any resolution of the UN Human Rights Council concerning the atrocities committed against the Rohingya and other minorities in Myanmar. So I think DFA, we need your inputs here, DFA.
Paano, Chair? Naunahan na ng kudeta.
Yeah, yung sa ground sa Myanmar yan. Sa UN na. Yeah, sige, DFA, can you give us your thoughts on this resolution?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Good afternoon, Your Honors. My name is Hendrik Garcia, Director for Human Rights and Humanitarian Issues at the Office of the UN and International Organizations at the DFA. With respect to this draft resolution, please allow me to provide some background information on our votes on this issue in the Human Rights Council. The Philippines has voted no to Human Rights Council resolutions on the situation of human rights of Rohingya Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar due to the following reasons. The Philippines is generally against country-specific resolutions that are divisive and politicize human rights, and which do not enjoy the support of the countries which they are aiming to help. The Philippines experienced this when Iceland unilaterally tabled a resolution against the Philippines without full consultations in 2019. There are, in fact, a number of such resolutions in the Human Rights Council and the UN General Assembly against developing countries. The Philippines has therefore been firm in maintaining the ASEAN principle of non-interference. Human Rights Council resolutions on Myanmar tend to fail to take into account actions made by the government on the ground, such as establishment of an independent commission on inquiry in 2018. Of course, this was in the previous administration there, and was chaired. This commission of inquiry was chaired by retired Philippine ambassador and member of SEDA, Rosario G. Manalo. Likewise, these country-specific resolutions are very costly to the UN system. They cost millions of dollars for these human rights mechanisms and mandates that we see do not produce lasting results on the ground. Furthermore, issues in the Rakhine state in Myanmar require long-term approaches rather than these harsh short-term actions imposed on the country concerned. The Philippines has therefore always underscored the need for a comprehensive and durable solution that addresses the root causes of the conflict in Rakhine state. We encourage that the Philippines' no votes be therefore viewed as not detracting from the Philippines' strong support to the cause of refugees and President Duterte's pledge of an open door policy, including for Rohingya from Rakhine state in Myanmar. In fact, Your Honors, the Philippines has been recognized as a model country for its stance in support of the plight of refugees by, nonetheless, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. We are actually working in quiet ways with the UN Commissioner for Refugees how we can support Rohingya from Rakhine state. The Philippines made a modest contribution to a special fund to support Rohingya recently. Also, the Philippines' no votes can be understood as previously seeking to give Myanmar the requisite diplomatic time and political space to comply with its international obligations to address the very complex and sensitive situation in Rakhine state. Nevertheless, as mentioned by the distinguished senator, in view of the current developments in Myanmar, the Philippines' position on this issue can be reviewed. On the current situation for Myanmar, we would defer to the Office of Asia and Pacific Affairs, Your Honor, as they were the latest updates. Nevertheless, if there are any questions on our votes in the Human Rights Council, I would be very glad to provide further clarifications for. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Is
Mr.
that what?
Chair.
Yes, Senator Tolentino.
Yes, if I can intervene, just one question. If I may ask DFA, because of the President's pronouncement that he is willing to accept the refugees coming from Myanmar a year ago, aside from the Human Rights Council, was this impressed upon the other human rights organizations out there, including the NGOs, European Human Rights Commission, etc., because this is a strong signal that the Duterte administration is really supportive of human rights. So, aside from the Human Rights Council, was this message disseminated through proper diplomatic channels that we are willing to accept that, just like during the time of President Quezon when we accepted the Jews? So, what was this done?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Your Honor. Indeed, sir, President Duterte's statement was at the UN General Assembly, and it was very well received by many foreign dignitaries and embassies here, for instance. At the DFA, we have done our best to promote this message, and the recognition we received from no less than the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in our statements, in engagements with civil society. And we've also provided this information very widely to our foreign service folks. So, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to reinforce Senator Tolentino's invocation of a time-honored Filipino tradition that we, in fact, welcome refugees from the time of President Quezon. And as we know, Elizabeth Zimmerman Duterte, the wife of the president, was actually one of those who took advantage of this together with the rest of her family. And also during the Vietnam War, the island of Morong in Bataan was dedicated to the so-called boat people. So I think this is a more concrete manifestation of our support to the Rohingya and the refugees than a mere resolution. Thank you.
Senator Tolentino, were you done? Okay, ka na? Senator,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Marcos, thank you.
Francis.
Senator Ontiveros, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my appreciation to Sir Garcia for actually already answering my first question. Sana po kaugnay nitong Senate Resolution 158 ni Sen. Laila. I took note of the points you raised. I was going to ask po kung what was the policy or what were the policies behind our country voting against these resolutions. At nag-take note po ako yung sinabi nyo, Sir Garcia, that our government generally is against country-specific resolutions which are divisive and so on. I believe there are about 3 or 4 policy points you raised. I have to make of record though, Mr. Chairman, Sir Garcia, that I do regret that we could not support the Rohingya people within Myanmar in terms of upholding their human rights, preventing and seeking redress of grievance for atrocities against them. Also because we have learned our own precious lessons about how national government better relates with, for example, indigenous peoples or wars of national liberation, for example, waged by the MNLF and the MILF previously, which now have been brought to a very good fruit through the long drawn out peace process in the governance efforts now in the BARM. So this is also similar to situations of other indigenous peoples, other, you might call them religious minorities in other countries in our region, for example, the Uyghurs in China. So I'm just left, Mr. Chair, with my last question. Sir Garcia, is it correct that Myanmar is a close ally of China?
Thank you very much, Madam Senator, for your question. I think for these regional and bilateral questions, we would defer to the appropriate office in the DFA, the Office of Asia Pacific Affairs. But thank you very much for your question. on the issue of indigenous peoples. The Philippines is also recognized as a leader. We have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, and we do support UN Human Rights Council resolutions on indigenous peoples. And in fact, quietly, as we extend our support to Myanmar forwarding it in a quiet manner, we're also seeking ways on how we could do this through South-South cooperation and appropriate dialogues with other developing countries. But we don't drum up this way in a politicized manner in the UN. Madam.
Thank you, Sir Garcia, for highlighting the IPRA. And indeed, that is actually one good example of how we would be not only within our rights, but properly exercising our mandates to act consistently between our domestic law and our foreign policy. And precisely because we have that, in a way, best practice law of the IPRA, I would have hoped that in the previous votes on the resolutions of the UNHRC, that we could have supported those resolutions regarding the Rohingya people. But I do note the answers that you have given, Sir Garcia. So Mr. Chair, who in DFA would be able to answer my question about the reason I asked po kung close ally ng China ang Myanmar, kasi it seems that our voting on this issue mirrors China's policy vis-a-vis Myanmar. And so I want to ask if that is related to China and Myanmar being close allies, and if there's any coordination with the Chinese government on the part of ours in terms of voting on resolutions regarding allied countries.
Who in the DFA can answer? But if you want an executive session on the question of coordination, we will grant it. Pero,
thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to request it of the chair, but if the chair will call one, I will participate in that as well.
If necessary, but I have a feeling we are not coordinating our votes there. But
I hope not, Mr. Chair.
On whether or not close allies, I don't know, baka subjective yung meaning ng close eh. What is a close ally? But, so anyway, DFA, share your wisdom with us. Who in the DFA? Please, Mr. Garcia, you have the floor din naman. Sige,
yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Madam Senator. Yes, well, we base our votes definitely not on the stance of another country, but it's based on our interests, and it's just so happened that in the last votes, I think China and the Philippines were the ones that voted no, but for instance, in other configurations of membership in the Human Rights Council, it's other countries too. For instance, I believe Russia voted no in the UN General Assembly. It's not always Philippines and China. Although having served in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, countries always informally discuss, share information before the voting on resolutions. And yes, China is very close to Myanmar, and China does take a very defensive policy on such country resolutions as well for their own interests. Maybe that's about what I can respond to at this stage. But I see Assistant Secretary Imperial also might want to interject. Thank you.
Yes, before ASEC Neil, Mr. Chair, maraming salamat kay Sir Garcia for your candor, and I certainly hope that your answer to the committee is more often rather than less often the description indeed of how we take our votes in important bodies like the UNHRC. And indeed, kamakailan lamang nung ayun na nga yung sinabi ni Sen Amy, nagkaroon na ng coup sa Myanmar. Nung una, parang we were shadowing the Chinese position. At first, tahimik tayo sa nangyari sa Myanmar. At the same time that China was blocking UN Security Council opinion against the coup in Myanmar. But now I'm glad to see our government at least expressing grave concern about what has happened in Myanmar and the fate of Aung San Suu Kyi and tens of others of government and opposition leaders. So salamat, Sir Garcia. Salamat, Mr. Chair. If ASEC Neil would like to add to that, I would appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Senator Ontiveros, you were talking about, yes, you were talking about
Secretary.
Myanmar.
Good afternoon.
My reaction to that, Myanmar remains the official one. I pour scorn on the Western world for destroying Aung San Suu Kyi and making her a victim of the military, because I think I've explained it, that Myanmar is divided between the army that holds it together, the army founded by her father, the country founded by her father, and all she had as a balance to the army was her reputation as a freedom fighter and my newspaper columnist in Today, which I think was the greater honor. And then she somehow maneuvered to make herself a leading figure in Myanmar to start pushing the country towards democracy. The Rohingya problem comes up. Some idiots in my office in New York said, no, that's a problem of Myanmar. No, it's not a problem. That's a problem of the British, who created a subclass of subhuman Rohingya, brought them to Burma, a highly ethnically conscious country, and left them there and never gave them residence or citizenship. I have Burmese friends who are very rich, and they look at them as animals. That's the British legacy. Now comes the situation of the Rohingya. Aung San Suu Kyi had to balance the continuing tolerance of the army for her democratic moves against the racial hatred against the Rohingya. And what does the Western and those fairies, I call them fairies, in Oxford do? They tear her down. They remove her reputation. She had only the adoration of the world to stand up with against the army. They stripped her of all of that. Every step she made in the freedom of Burma, they erased, all so that they could feel well tearing her down. And what did the army realize at the end? That Aung San Suu Kyi, a woman who's done more than anyone for freedom, a woman who lost the affection of her son, who cannot forgive her because she refused to go to England to see her husband, their father, die, because she knew that if she went, she couldn't go back to her country. What did the West do? And now the army saw this woman has nothing. She has no name. She has no reputation. It's time to get her out of the way. And that's what happened. So my position is this. The army is indispensable to the unity of Myanmar. I told Aung San Suu Kyi, be careful of the West. The West destroyed Syria. The West destroyed Libya because they are hungry for oil. The West is hungry for the gas and oil of Burma. They're not interested in the freedom of Burma. They want Burma broken up into pieces so that they can prey on it. They said, the army alone can keep Burma together. Work with the army. But the army won't work with you if you don't count for it as a power in your own right. And those goddamn fairies, I don't want to use the word, but it's a two-syllable word. And Oxford tore her to pieces. And that was also the New York Times. They tore her to pieces. And so now where is she now? And where is Burmese democracy? 10 steps forward. Just for the liberals in the United States to feel good tearing down a woman, they have gone 20 steps back for Burmese democracy. That's my feeling. That's my policy. With Burma, we work with the powers around Burma to see if we can convince the great powers there, forget the United States. We talk to China. We talk to India. We say, can we go back to the status quo ante? Can we go back and put the mother of Burmese democracy back there and then resume the progress towards the freedom that you and I got at EDSA? You know what I mean? My God. So if this department will never listen to the West on this issue, never. And in fact, most Asian countries are looking to our leadership, to my leadership,
as a more nuanced approach to the Burmese problem. Because the last thing we want is to work with the countries in the West who destroyed Burmese democracy. I'm so angry because I met that woman. She worked with me as a writer. She's brilliant. And she gave everything in herself to make her people free. And the West destroyed her, all for their sissy sentiments, their human rights sentiments. When you know what? I challenge every single critic of Suu Kyi. Any one of you stand up who's ever fought up for freedom? Any of you suffered for freedom? We did, right, Risa? We did. You and I did. Those faggots, not a single one of them did. And they dared judge that woman. Well, now my job is to try to put her back. Maybe convince the powers that be. The status quo ante was working. Let's see if you can go back together. But the last thing, the last people I will listen to is a white face on this issue. And I charge all my people in the Department of Foreign Affairs. You listen to a white man, you listen to white opinion, and you're finished. I know you all want to go back to Western capitals. Well, you won't. So that's my opinion on the Burmese question. I'm really angry that they destroyed a great thing.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Secretary Locsin. Any other questions or comments from the senators or from the other resource persons on this particular issue?
Oh, wait. May I add this? I heard Edsel criticize Duterte. No, when you saw what was declared, Edsel Lagman criticized Duterte for a passive attitude towards the junta. No, that was me. That was me. If it was up to President Duterte, he is a man of personal loyalties. He has a tremendous affection and admiration for Suu Kyi. But I am holding my own. I'm saying, let's not get emotional over this. This is not about friendship. This is about bringing things back to the way they were. So for now, he has not repudiated. But I'm going to continue that way. So please, it's the cheapest thing is to hit the president. Because if it was up to him, he'd go elsewhere with this issue.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you. So if there are no other matters, I would just like to thank the Secretary for his very passionate input on what is happening in Burma or in Myanmar. Okay, but that's beyond our resolution, and we will just give you time, Mr. Secretary, to develop your thinking on what is happening in Myanmar and to implement your initiatives, and then maybe in the future you can brief the committee on what the DFA has done regarding the latest developments in Myanmar. Okay, but as far as the Rohingya resolution of Senator De Lima is concerned, the position of the chair now is to suspend the hearing on this resolution and give Senator De Lima time to go over the exchanges, the inputs which happened this afternoon, and we will resume hearing this resolution sometime in the future. If there is no objection from the committee members, that is how we will continue regarding PS 158. Is it okay with the committee members? If there is no objection, so committee secretary, that is what we will do. Suspend PS 158, give time for the author to react to the inputs given this afternoon, and then rehear or resume the hearing sometime in the future. Okay, let's move on.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let's move on. And but there is DOLE Assistant Secretary Rubia Tutay is here. Does she want to reopen the visa upon arrival issue? Is there inputs from DOLE?
We were informed by the Assistant Secretary, sir, that she's just here to monitor.
Okay, so no need to reopen so we move on. Let's now go. The Secretary Locsin is here, and I think he wants to really contribute to this issue. PS Resolution 535 relating to the selling of the Philippine properties in Japan. Can you give us an update, sir, on what is happening to this issue?
I remain steadfast that I will, to the extent that it requires this DFA to sign off on the sale of the properties in Japan, I reject it. As what I remember is the first disgrace that almost hit the Cory government when we took power was an attempt to sell it. No, I will not sell the blood of our people. That was reparations. And I will not sell it. I know some people like to think that they have influence and they can do it. Let them try. It's not gonna happen.
Where did the idea come from, sir? How come this became a subject matter of a Senate resolution? That means people were talking about it. The media was reporting
Well,
efforts to. Were there really efforts to sell our?
Well, I was told there was a proposal, and I'm not going to waste my time reading a crooked proposal. I immediately denounced it, and I said, this is the position is non-compromisable. I won't budge. Finished. And then I'm so happy that the Senate backed me up, and I'm very grateful for that. That's what keeps us honest.
Okay, thank you, sir. So that means the idea has been shut down immediately on site upon hearing. Okay, but I have a question related to the subject matter of the resolution. How are our properties in Japan? How are we also being able to take advantage, good economic or financial advantage of the properties in Japan if we are interested?
Well, I will
Chair,
send
if I
you.
may add to that,
Yeah.
it was a matter of grave concern to all of us that since 1997, the website of the Philippine Embassy in Tokyo indicated that the property had been completely abandoned due to maintenance difficulties, resulting in the Japanese government's condemnation of it as uninhabitable. May we know if that's still the case?
Okay, Secretary, yes, it's your
Well,
turn, Secretary.
well, to begin with, we will furnish you with a memo that you have every right to read. If we make it, you pay our taxes, you pay our salaries, everything we have, you have the right to see. And we'll tell you the state of all our properties. Gary knows he's in charge of these properties. But as I said, whether in a state of disrepair, whether in a need for new repairs or whatever, we will never sell it. We will never dispose of it. Gary, would you like to help me here? The state of the properties.
Yes, Gary, and also I may add, are these properties a subject of litigation in Japan?
As far as I know, no. Gary, please.
Yes, sir, and thank you, sir. I don't have anything to add more to what the secretary has already said, but and of course, we support the secretary in every step of the way. Thank you, sir.
Anyway, the secretary will be submitting that memorandum that you showed us. So I think everything is there. No? Everything is there.
Yes.
Siguro. Okay. So please please answer also my question if there is litigation, because I heard that there is litigation. Okay. So if there are no more questions from the other members, we can move on. Any other question? So we heard the secretary say that under his watch, these properties will never be sold.
Mr. Chair,
Secretary, Senator Tolentino. Yeah.
that statement coming from Secretary Locsin more or less assured us that we're going to win a medal in the Tokyo Olympics a few months from now.
Well, that would be one thing. That would be great. My God. Hope so.
Okay, so and talking about the position papers or memoranda, may we ask the DFA to submit the position papers or updated reports on the on the resolutions that we heard this afternoon, paki na lang, I've been informed by the committee secretary that the DFA has not submitted updated reports. Okay, so we can now move on to we can move on to our last two. No, okay, no, another one, the next one. There's a resolution in effect that we support the proposal of India and South Africa pending before the WTO that we suspend relevant provisions in the TRIPS agreement on intellectual property. Since the author is here, Senator Peros may want to elaborate and expound on her resolution.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Risa.
Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair. Meron akong isang tanong para sa DFA and then a couple of questions sa Trade Justice Pilipinas. I believe, Mr. Chair, they are represented here in our hearing by Attorney Tony Salvador or alternatively by Joseph Puruganan. Meron po silang maikling statement, Mr. Chair. Could the Chair allow Attorney Tony or Joseph just to make that brief statement, and on that basis, I will ask my just 3 follow-up questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sige, go ahead. Sino po ito? Just identify yourself.
Attorney Tony Salvador, are you online? Or si Joseph Puruganan po ba? Okay, yun na po, Attorney Tony
Salvador.
Attorney Tony
Yes.
Salvador. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to read a statement, if you will, Mr. Chair, coming from Women Health, Medical Action Group, Ayos na Gamot sa Abot Kayang Presyo, Fair Trade Alliance, Focus on the Global South, Third World Network, and Central Labor Confederation. We represent CSOs working on health issues, international trade issues, tax justice, and labor rights. And we respectfully ask the Senate to pass a resolution asking our country to co-sponsor the TRIPS waiver proposal at the WTO, which proposal was initiated by India and South Africa. The TRIPS, or the Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, is one of the WTO agreements to which the Philippines has acceded to since 1995. The treaty requires our country to protect intellectual property rights. However, these rights also grant intellectual property holder monopoly rights over production and supply of essential medical products, such as medicines and vaccines, which in turn can hinder timely, affordable access to such products and hinder containment of COVID-19. While we recognize the need to protect intellectual property, these property rights would have to yield when public health is at stake, which is clearly what we have now with this COVID-19 pandemic. More than a year into the pandemic, severe shortages of medical products, including test kits, protective equipment, ventilators, therapeutics, and medical devices persist in many countries, including the Philippines, thus hampering prevention, treatment, and containment of COVID-19. The disparity in the access to vaccine is especially shocking. High-income countries, which constitute just 16% of the population, of the world population, have claimed for themselves alone 4.2 billion doses, compared to 1.9 billion doses by 84% of the world population in the developing countries. Many of these rich countries have purchased enough doses of vaccines for their populations to be vaccinated several times over. Of the 50 countries where vaccination programs have started, 40 are high-income countries. The global scarcity of supplies is a major concern and is not limited to vaccines. Presently, global vaccine supply is dependent primarily on a few manufacturers, including Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Moderna. And these big pharmaceutical firms are unable to meet the global demand even for the rich countries. We bring to your attention that the European Union countries themselves are facing significant issues with respect to timely supply of adequate quantities of vaccines. In response, the EU has put in place measures that may limit export of vaccines to the Philippines. We also stress that COVAX, the WHO-led initiative to provide vaccines to more than 180 countries can only make 2 billion doses available by the end of 2021, by the end of this year, representing a mere fraction of the needs of 6.4 billion people in developing countries. To control COVID-19 in our country and to develop herd immunity, at least 70 to 80% of the Philippine population will have to be vaccinated with a very effective vaccine. In this case, at least 172 million doses may be needed, whereby each person receives 2 doses. And even 1 round of vaccination may not be sufficient. As new variants emerge, further vaccination may be required. Clearly, there's an urgent need to expand and diversify supply options and enable manufacturers from across the world, especially in developing countries, to ramp up vaccine production. For this to happen, intellectual property barriers must be removed, even if only temporarily. The TRIPS waiver is the best way to do this, as it will give manufacturers and governments the freedom to act to meet the global need for COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. The TRIPS waiver proposal of the WTO, while proposed originally by South Africa and India, has gained the support of about 100 developing countries. It is also supported by the World Health Organization, the Joint UN Program on HIV/AIDS, UNITAID, and many civil society organizations, including Doctors Without Borders. It is also supported by a number of international labor unions, of which Philippine laborers are also members of. His Excellency Archbishop Ivan Jurkovic, permanent observer of the Holy See to the WTO and the UN in Geneva, has also strongly supported the waiver. Pope Francis himself has said, and I quote, "It would be sad if the vaccine for COVID-19 priority were to be given to the richest. It would be sad if this vaccine were to become the property of this nation or that other nation, rather than universal and for all." In his Christmas message, in fact, he has called on political and business leaders to not allow market forces and patent laws to take priority over the making of COVID-19 vaccines available to all, condemning nationalism and the virus of radical individualism. The COVID-19 pandemic is not just a catastrophic health crisis.
Attorney Tony, is this
Yes, sir.
still a long statement? Because we get,
Yeah.
I think we get yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 paragraphs. Maybe a minute, Your Honor. Sorry about this.
Two paragraphs. Okay, finish the 2 paragraphs. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The COVID-19 pandemic is not just a catastrophic health crisis, it is an economic crisis, a humanitarian crisis that requires compassion and solidarity. We need urgent, unprecedented action in order to contain the spread globally. We need manufacturers from every continent in developing countries, wherever possible, to be engaged in the production. Let me just conclude by saying we respectfully request the Senate, Your Honor, to urgently ask the President of the Philippines to express our country's unconditional support to the proposal to waive certain TRIPS obligations for the prevention, treatment, and containment of COVID-19. We ask that our government co-sponsor the TRIPS waiver proposed by India and South Africa. Thank you, Your Honor, and I apologize for the length of
Thank you. Thank you. The resolution is pending before the WTO. Tama ba yan?
Yes, Your
To
Honor.
co-sponsor that. That's your point. To co-sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, today they're going to have a TRIPS Council meeting, because the process is that they go first to the TRIPS Council and then they endorse it to the General Assembly of the WTO.
Okay, Secretary Locsin, sir.
Yes. One is the most compelling name that I've heard there is India. Because when among the handful of unmentionables, fought with Mar Rojas for the Cheaper Medicine Act, my only argument against the big pharma was this: you threaten to cut us off, India will back us up with its giant manufacturing capacity. You mentioned Doctors Without Borders. That is something to reckon with, because they are men and women of integrity. But you must remember this: we don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, because Big Pharma, which was our enemy, has come to the rescue. Every single government has failed to come across in finding a vaccine, except possibly the Russians. And I don't even know. For all you know, that's a private. Gamaleya is a private enterprise in Russia. It's no longer a communist country. What I'm saying is, let's be careful about condemning the manufacturers, because the manufacturers are all under states, under governments. Are the governments compelling the manufacturers under their jurisdiction to reserve the vast output of their manufacturing capacity for their own populations? Is it something that pharma has a decision to make? Because let's not condemn those who may be powerless to affect it. Because what I know is that they were willing to sell to whoever was willing to come forward first. And we were, Babes and I were. I don't know, people drop the ball. I'm not a basketball player. I just get the ball and then toss it up. So what I'm saying is, let's be careful about condemning the manufacturers. Maybe we should reserve condemnation on the states. And a long time ago, I already said to the United Nations, if the United Nations fails to reprimand the countries that are not willing, the states, member states that are not willing to share this vaccine, so the least among us, then the United Nations loses its right to exist, loses all moral authority, and that is the end of multilateralism. Before we blame the manufacturers, let's be ready to blame our friends in the European Union, okay? Where our ambassadors are staying. Before I have my ambassadors condemn the manufacturers and take up the WTO, I would like to see our ambassadors attack their host governments for not letting the manufacturers sell the vaccines to the first come, first serve. Because I doubt that these Western governments, these European governments, advance the money already. I think by fiat, they said to the manufacturers, 4 billion for us. Then for the rest, you can sell it to the rest of the world. So let's be careful who we blame, because we certainly don't need Western governments. We need the manufacturers.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
And I'll have my ambassadors going after their host governments.
Thank you, Secretary. Senator Risa, you want to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one question each na lang to DFA and to Attorney Tony, to Trade Justice Filipinas. So for the Department of Foreign Affairs, whether Secloxin or another, for the record, sir, is the Philippines inclined to support the TRIPS proposal of South Africa and India?
Well, I'll certainly think about it. But right now, I will not instinctively join those Western governments.
Thank you. I hope that the good secretary and department.
And I will get to the bottom as to who is cornering this market. The goddamn host governments of my ambassadors or the manufacturers. And we will take it out on whoever is the guilty party, including the states.
All right, Mr. Chairman and Secretary, I'm appreciative at least of the Secretary's statement to think about it. Even the way that the resolution is crafted, it's more positive in terms of supporting the proposal, and then in terms of suspending the implementation of the TRIPS, which is provided for, as the good Secretary knows, which is provided for in any case within the TRIPS system. So, Mr. Chair, just for my last question to Trade Justice Filipinas, kay Attorney Tony. Attorney Tony, you already answered my first question on whether the WHO supports this TRIPS waiver proposal. Sabi niyo, WHO does support it. So, yung huling tanong ko na lang po, what is a response to comments that the TRIPS waiver is unfair to patent holders, since after all now they spent heavily for R&D?
Yes, Your Honor. Yung ano po kasi, actually all big pharma, historically nakakakuha po sila ng subsidies sa kanilang mga respective states. In fact, in this case, no, even yung dun sa yung German firm na ka-tie up ng Pfizer, that subsidies to the BioNTech. Thank you, Asek. To the tune of 440 million euros, I believe. Euros or dollars, I forget. So historically, ng mga health rights advocates is that yung patents hindi naman exclusively pinagkakagastos ng mga big pharma. Nandiyan ng mga academicians, nandiyan ng universities, nandiyan ng states. Kumbaga collective efforts yan, Your Honor.
And in any case, Attorney Tony and Mr. Chair, interesante po sa akin na yung isa sa ORIG na proponent ay ang bansang India, which itself has a very strong pharma industry. So, and yet, by them co-leading this campaign with South Africa, pinapakita nila na this is a worthy investment to be made even by the pharma industry itself or pharma industry strong nations like themselves, lalo na sa panahon ngayon na the whole world is looking to turn the corner on developing herd immunity, preventing further infection, and really healing all countries from COVID-19. So salamat po, Mr. Chairman, salamat sa DFA, kay Sec. Locsin. Salamat po, Attorney Tony. Salamat,
Secretary
Mr.
Locsin, yes, go ahead. Secretary Locsin.
Just a comment. Since you're right about Big Pharma getting huge subsidies for the development of new medicines, although it turns out to be not as big as I had thought. I thought most of the research was undertaken at government expense. But since it is these states that have subsidized and therefore have a stranglehold on Big Pharma, where is the country of BioNTech? Which state is that? Germany? Are they voting for this, for the India resolution? Are they? Is Germany voting? Is Britain voting? Is the United States voting? I want to know if these goddamn countries that control these pharmaceuticals and who claim to have a hold on them by the subsidies they give, how are these states going to vote on this? I want to know. Because I want to tell my ambassadors what to do to their host governments.
Attorney Tony, you're the one monitoring this closely. You have information to share with us?
Well, the EU is opposed.
Opposed.
Your Honor. Yeah,
Opposed.
the EU is opposed. Yes, and the United States also.
Opposed.
Yes, Attorney Tony, not only are they opposed, they've put up a ban for any exportation.
Yeah, that's true also.
Attorney Iparagire, she's knowledgeable about this. Can we hear from her, Mr. Chairman?
Sino po yan? Secretary? USEC? What is that?
Sec. Lori.
USEC Lori.
USEC.
She's on top of that.
Sige.
Um, Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. Yes, maybe just a bit of a background on the current developments in the process in the WTO TRIPS Council to consider this particular proposal from India and South Africa. This has a very broad scope, and they're proposing to suspend provisions of the WTO trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights as it relates to patents, industrial design, copyright, and undisclosed information. So in terms of product, this would cover vaccines, medicines, treatments, test kits, masks, ventilators, etc., and trade secrets. The supporters, of course, are from the developing and least developed countries, and there are 11 co-sponsors and 11 countries that have expressed the support for this particular proposal.
Can we have the names? Can we have the names of the countries? I want to hear a white country.
Yes, sir.
White.
Yes, sir.
Supporting.
Yes.
Because I'm going to have my ambassadors go after those white governments.
The co-sponsors?
Yeah.
India, South Africa, Kenya,
England?
Pakistan.
India.
That's in favor. That's in favor. India.
These are in favor.
In favor.
Of the proposal to suspend TRIPS agreement relevant provisions. India, South Africa, Kenya, Mozambique, Pakistan, Bolivia, Venezuela, Mongolia, Zimbabwe, and Egypt. Those who have expressed support are Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Chad, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Mauritius, Argentina, Jamaica, and China.
Oh my
11,
God,
11.
those are all colored countries like us.
Oh,
Not a single white country is supporting it. And yet the manufacturers are under white governments. I'm going to order my ambassadors to register their opposition to their hosts. God
Question
damn it.
lang po, is Canada supporting the fifth waiver given that they bought 5 times the necessary dose for their population? Kasama ba Canada?
No.
Canada there, Canada. I love Canada.
Canada po, Pilakyaw. 5 times na kailangan nila ang binili.
5 times the population.
5 times the population they bought the vaccines for.
Question to Ambassador Iparagire.
Yes.
What countries have expressed their opposition to the
Yes,
India-Africa resolution? Meron ba? Expressed opposition?
Yes, Your
Kanino?
Honor. The main oppositors to the resolution, of course, are coming from the developed and industrial economies.
Can you name them,
the
please?
US, EU, Canada, UK, Japan, Australia, and others.
Oh, all white.
Mr. Chair.
That is not right.
Sir, if I may continue po, in the WTO, a decision such as a proposal to waive existing obligations would require a consensus among the WTO members, 153 member states of the WTO. And if consensus is not reached, then it requires 3/4 majority vote. And that would be about 115 countries voting in support of the resolution. So there is a wide divergence of views in the WTO. So the chair of the WTO TRIPS Council has made a decision to continue the discussions on this issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ma'am. Senator Tolentino. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, for the record, since our committee of the whole meetings for several weeks ago transpired, I have been asking this question. What will be the effect of TRIPS on our short-term, long-term plans to acquire vaccines? I've been asking this to the DTI, the Department of Health, and even to the Patent Office. I think the Patent Office officers present here, to put it in a proper perspective.
Senator Tolentino.
Yes. Do we need a patent before we import a vaccine? That's my first question. The answer given to me was no. Do we need an EUA first before you get a patent? The answer given to me was no. So there's no correlation right now, as far as I know, as far as the answer I got, there's no correlation between the issuance of an emergency use authorization and a patent issuance, which will trigger a 20-year proprietary rights, if I'm not mistaken. So the issue here is, if you get a TRIPS waiver, it will enable a manufacturer to get in. But the records of the Patent Office, probably you can correct me, would show that there has never been a single patent applicant from AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, among others. So I joined the clamor for that. But in the short term, I think the Patent Office can hanggang ngayon nagtatanong pa ako ano yung relevance sa atin pag sumama tayo dito sa efforts na ma-waive yung TRIP. Moderna is now saying that they will not be utilizing their patent rights. So siguro yon, it's a question of allowing manufacturers and the manufacturing process to be transplanted to the Philippines sans the protective patent regulations. Yun siguro, that's a long-term proposition. I'll show you a good news. Lahat po kayo. This has been what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks. There's now a pharma zone to be erected in Bulacan. So, can you answer that, Patent Office? Ano yung effect ng waiver sa TRIPS doon sa emergency use authorization? I hope you'll be giving a different answer from the ones you gave me a few weeks back.
Okay, but Secretary Locsin is raising his hand. But after Secretary Locsin, we have Director General Barba of IP Philippines. So, Secretary, kayo muna.
No, I thank you very much, Senator Tolentino. That's really important because I did hear that the pharmaceutical companies, not their goddamn government, but the pharmaceutical companies are willing to waive their patents. So why are we taking this hostile position just to feel good against them if they're willing to waive it anyway?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Ontiveros. Sige.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Related po sa points raised by Sen. Francis and Sec. Locsin, clarificatory question kay Attorney Tony. Attorney Tony, palagay ko lalo na dahil baka matatagalan at least medium term yung pag-ramp up ng domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity dito sa atin. Hindi ba itong, if ever, pag-support natin sa proposal ng India and South Africa would be complementary dun sa pag-issue ng FDA ngayon ng mga emergency use authorizations for the use of our government? Kasi I think hindi contradictory kundi complementary kung susuportahan din itong India-South Africa proposal para sa suspension ng ilang TRIPS provisions so as to enable, for example, parallel importation and other yung pagluluwag dun sa TRIPS provisions that under normal conditions, non-pandemic conditions, ay kailangang obserbahin ng Philippine market. Hindi po ba, Attorney Tony?
Yes, Your Honor, that's true. Very complementary po yan. Tapos at the same time, actually, just because there's a TRIPS waiver does not necessarily mean that we would have to waive or derogate from all of our intellectual property laws. It just gives us an opportunity, an option to derogate from our TRIPS agreements, but not. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we can just continue enforcing all of our patent laws, enforcing the TRIPS agreement, etc., etc. So it's just a policy option that will be open to us.
At saka time-bound lang ito, Attorney Tony, di ba? Just for the tendency of this COVID-19 pandemic, hanggang mabakunahan natin lahat ng dapat mabakunahan ayon sa DOH at palapit na tayo or nakamit na natin yung sinasabi nilang herd immunity. Di ba, Attorney Tony?
That's correct. That's correct, Your Honor.
Salamat, Attorney Tony. Salamat, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will now give the floor to Director General Barba of the IPO Philippines to tell us the ramifications of siding with the India, South Africa, and not siding. Is Director General Barba here?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, classmate.
Chair Coco Pimentel, Vice Chair Francis Tolentino, Senator Amy Marcos, Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Pia Cayetano, Senator Risa Antiveros, Secretary Teodoro Locsin, fellow workers in government, good afternoon. Our office has been monitoring the progress of the WTO discussions of the proposed waiver, and we informed the body that at the WTO TRIPS Council meeting last December 2020, WTO members agreed to continue discussion on the proposed waiver as there was no consensus for its adoption. IPOPHIL will continue to monitor the progress of the proposal and coordinate with the DTI and the DFA. Your Honors, the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines is the government agency mandated to administer and implement the state policies on IP. Because of this mandate, it is critical that the IP system must be stable and predictable in the grant, protection, and enforcement of IP rights for it to be an effective mechanism to foster and promote innovation and creation. However, we are fully cognizant of the fact that intellectual property bears a social function and must yield to the common good, such as public health, education, among others. For IPOPHIL, we thank Congress for a responsive and balanced IP code that has struck the delicate and appropriate balance between IP rights and the common good, given the context of a developing country. Particularly on patents, the amendments on the patent provisions by virtue of Republic Act 9502 or the Universally Accessible, Cheaper, and Quality Medicines Act, which instituted the TRIPS flexibilities, given to member states pursuant to the 2001 WTO Ministerial Declaration on TRIPS and Public Health has ensured that the patent system will not be an obstacle to addressing public health needs. IPOFIL is aware that IP rights are not absolute and are subject to exceptions and limitations as provided in the IP Code in pursuit of other state policies such as the primacy of public health. Given this context, Your Honors, IPOFIL respectfully submits the following comments. 1. The provisions of the WTO TRIPS Agreement and the flexibilities under the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and Public Health and the TRIPS Amendment under Article 31 BIS are sufficient to address public health needs and emergencies. In the proposed waiver, the proponents argue that the flexibilities are inadequate and their procedure is cumbersome. The said flexibilities, however, have been available to all WTO members, although rarely used. Similarly, special compulsory licensing, which allows, subject to certain conditions, the importation of patented products without the consent of the patent owners, have never been used in the Philippines. 2. There are several government measures to ensure access to COVID-19 related medicines, vaccines, and other related supplies. In the case of IPOFIL, we have prioritized the implementation of programs that will ensure access to critical medical supplies. This includes providing information on off-patent medical products and technologies that can be readily used by those in the medical field and immediately implementing online services for expedited application and processing of COVID-19 related technologies. In our website, we publish patents that have lapsed and those that have been forfeited to ensure that the public is informed in a timely manner of those patents that have fallen into the public domain. Our office is also part of the discussions of DTI with pharma companies to discuss access to COVID-19 medicines, vaccines, and medical supplies. Third, the terms and conditions of the proposal are broad and vague. As of the last session of the TRIPS Council, the scope, length, and manner of implementation of the proposed waiver, terms and conditions are still unclear. For us, the broad coverage and unclear information will result to an unpredictable and unstable intellectual property system which may undermine its effectiveness as an incentivizing mechanism for research and development. It is also important to note, Your Honors, that based on patent applications filed at the global level, about 80 to 84% are the result of private sector R&D, with government-driven R&D only accounting for 1 to 2%. Given the WTO TRIPS Council decision to continue the discussion of the proposal, we anticipate and we are hopeful that there will be modifications or refinements on the proposal at the multilateral level, at which point our position will be reviewed accordingly. Effect of supporting the proposal and implementing the waiver. 1, to existing IP laws. There will be the need to amend Republic Act 8293 as amended, or the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines, since the waiver is in essence exclusions with respect to acquisition of IP protection or rights and providing additional limitations on IPRs which are not covered by the current legislation. 2, to trade agreements entered into by the Philippines as well as those being currently negotiated. In submitting our position and comments, IPOFIL took into account that we have existing obligations under several trade agreements, such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or RCEP, the Philippine-European Free Trade Association, FTA, and the ASEAN-Australia and New Zealand FTA, which are based on our commitments under the TRIPS agreement. Moreover, we are currently reviewing and are in the initial stages of negotiations for several bilateral and regional FTAs, such as the Philippine-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, Philippine-Korea FTA, Philippine-European Union FTA, and an ASEAN-EU FTA, among others. Given our obligations and commitments under the concluded agreements and those currently being negotiated, we are concerned about the effect of the waiver proposal to this existing obligations. IPOFIL subscribes and submits the whole of government approach in deciding a national position. Your Honors, as in any matter that requires a national position, IPOFIL is mindful of and fully embraces the process. In the executive branch, where there are thorough and inclusive discussions and deliberations among different government agencies. In this case, IPOFIL is a member of the Technical Committee on WTO Matters, chaired by the Department of Trade and Industry, and the Department of Health, Food and Drug Administration, Department of Foreign Affairs, and other agencies are likewise represented in this interagency committee. We have submitted our position to the TCWM for consideration in coming up with the national position. Thank you very much, Your Honors.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Ontiveros. Thank you, DG Barba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Salamat din po, DG Barba. Two follow-up points, Mr. Chair. Yung isa, it's a point of information na kabaliktad dun sa isang sinight ni DG Barba. I think the contribution of non-pharma companies sa vaccine development ay hindi ganun ka-modest na 1 to 2% lang in terms of R&D. Meron pong study pinublish po sa Scientific American na for the billion-dollar COVID vaccines, basic government-funded science laid the groundwork. So yun yung seedbed upon which even the pharma companies spent for R&D. Tapos po sa ngayon, tungkol po dun sa seeking relief through the TRIPS flexibilities. Ang problema lang po kasi, Mr. Chair, kung ang gagawing daan natin ay through the TRIPS flexibilities already provided for within the TRIPS, we would have to address the IP issues one by one. Alam naman nating lahat, nasa gitna tayo ng isang napaka-urgent na sitwasyon. It's really a race for all the possible vaccines na maaaprubahan ng FDA natin na pwedeng ibakuna ng DOH sa ating mga kababayan. In the meantime, Mr. Chair, we do have this proposal of India and South Africa. Sabi po ni Attorney Tony kanina, more than 100 countries have already signed on. And if we have, 195 countries in the world, that accounts for more than half already of the nation states in the world. So baka tignan po natin, i-consider po ng komite itong proposal ng India and South Africa, yung resolution ko po na suportahan ito as a complementation to, addition to our ongoing initiatives. Kahit yung cheaper medicines law na binanggit kanina ni Sec. Locsin na tinrabaho namin way back in the 13th and 14th Congresses, naka-embed na po doon yung ibang mga TRIPS flexibilities on parallel importation, on BOLAR provision, against evergreening. Pero hanggang sa ngayon, yung mga iyon ay hindi pa fully maximized or optimized. Now is really the time. This is the moment of greatest public health emergency sa ating recent history in the world, kasaysayan ng ating bansa. So perhaps we should take advantage of those principles already embedded in the cheaper medicines law at muli, gaya ng pinag-usapan natin kanina with Sir Garcia, i-wed yung domestic law with our foreign policy. And I hope, Mr. Chair, the committee to favorably consider yung pagsuporta sa proposal ng India and South Africa sa WTO regarding suspension of TRIPS, especially in relation to vaccines, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does the DTI want to say something about this? DTI?
Yes, Chair.
Sino to?
ASEC Alan B. Hefty
Yes,
po.
okay.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair, and also Your Honors. Just a brief insights on this particular issue. As mentioned earlier, this is something that we have to, of course, study carefully and take into account all possible repercussions of taking position on the issue. But just to provide context on the discussion, the objective here basically is for us to have access to affordable medicines to address COVID-19 challenges that we have. And thus the question is, how are we going to operationalize the same under the current pandemic? Now, the important question there is that are there existing mechanisms that would ensure access to affordable medicines? And I think it was explained well by DG Barba that under our current law and also under TRIPS, particularly Article 31 and Article 31 bis, there are already existing mechanisms. And these are, of course, the availability of voluntary licensing, compulsory licensing, special compulsory licensing, and also parallel importation. Now, what's the purpose of this waiver? We have to take into account that this is in the international law context. So basically, the consideration is if there is a waiver, then member states of the WTO will be in a way exonerated once in a way they breach or they will not make good their commitments under the TRIPS because there is a waiver. Now, the question is that is there also an available mechanism under existing TRIPS agreement wherein possible exemptions can be looked at or considered? Based on study of some experts, and I understand South Center conducted a study on this, one possible exception, even without the waiver, that member state can take into account is Article 73, that is on security exception. That is when a member state considers that the measure is it considers necessary to its essential security interest, and the same is taken in times of emergency, then that can be a possible exception. Now, of course, there are other views on the matter, but this is something worthy of consideration. Now, the most important aspect also that we have to look at is that since the waiver is more on the international law context, the question is that what about the national law? Because for all intents and purposes, we have our existing IP code and other IP-related laws. And once there is a waiver, it will not suspend, and as explained earlier also by Attorney Salvador, it will not suspend the implementation and application of our IP laws. Thus, if a particular medicine has existing patents, still the Philippines, under its national law, will have to implement all laws relating to protection and enforcement of this IP. So in this context, Mr. Chair, it is very important that we delineate international issues from national issues, and from there we have to consolidate all the inputs of concerned agencies so that we can take a whole of government approach on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hepti. Okay, what's the pleasure of the author of the resolution? Because this is my feeling, Senator Ontiveros, no, as chairman. From the information I got, number one, the resolution, the India-South Africa resolution, might still be going or is still undergoing negotiations and might still be amended at the level of the WTO. So, and from what I get from even DJ Barba, his position is once we see the final, we may be able to support an amended resolution. So, the position of the chair is to defer committee action on your resolution, await further developments, but in the meantime, request now formal position papers from DFA, DTI, and the IPO Philippines on the resolution. It's not really on the Senate resolution, but actually on the India-South Africa resolution. Punta na tayo run sa subject matter of the Senate resolution, which is the India-South Africa resolution pending before the WTO. So if the author is amenable to that, we can suspend the consideration of this subject matter and give the instruction for submission of position papers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's, of course, for any resolution author, it's not the best alternative outcome. But, of course, in our legislative work, we always value the inputs in terms of formal position papers from the different departments in our counterpart in the executive. In any case, whether we decide or not, or as part of government, Philippine civil society will continue their campaign, and they've already, sila nga po itong Trade Justice Pilipinas na lumapit sa atin. I'm just hoping that in a timely fashion, if and when our government decides to support the proposal, we can then join forces with Philippine civil society at the WTO, na hindi tayo mapag-iwanan ng panahon kung sakasakaling those in favor of this proposal will win in the ongoing debate within the WTO. Ang akin lang naman kasi sa ngayon, Mr. Chair, wala namang mawawala sa atin if we support the proposal. But having said that, I submit to the decision of the chair. I just wonder, Mr. Chair, before I close, if Attorney Tony has any last word or appeal to the committee about this matter, Mr. Chair.
Sige, Attorney Salvador, please
Yes, of course.
further enlighten us. Sige.
And
Yes,
Mr. Chair, I had a further request after Attorney Salvador. Thank
Sige,
you.
Attorney Salvador.
Mr. Chair?
Who is that, Secretary?
Yes, me also. May I have just a short remark?
So this is our sequence: Attorney Salvador, Senator Marcos, and then Secretary Locsin. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, parang naputol yung signal ni Attorney Tony. Kung wala si Attorney Tony, baka si Joseph Puruganan, also of Trade Justice Pilipinas.
Is Joseph Puruganan? Okay, wala. So let's wait for ano muna. Anyway, we'll give them a chance, Senator Risa. Senator
Salamat,
Marcos.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Marcos, please.
Yes, while I fully support the effort against vaccine injustice and nationalism, let me request, as the chairman has requested, specifically our international lawyers to elucidate us on the TRIPS agreement provisions, where in fact there is no clear exception to copyright and individual design protection, as the TRIPS is primarily for IP, no? So it's not intended. Ang pagkaintindi ko kasi sa TRIPS, it's not intended for emergency procurement. Kanina yung DOH o si Alan referred to the security aspect contained in Article 73. Kapag threat to security and in times of emergency, if we can get further explanation about that, and if in fact there is a workaround in the restrictions of the TRIPS kapag emergency procurement. Sana aralin nila yon. Kasi in the meantime, sabi nga ni Senator Risa, medyo long playing to, in the meantime, baka magamit natin yung exception ng emergency procurement under the TRIPS itself.
So pwedeng in writing na yon, Senator Marcos, sa position paper nila? In writing? Please respond or please cover the subject matter raised by Senator Marcos in the position paper. Okay, Secretary Locsin.
Yeah, no, just a very short one. Senator Ontiveros raises a good point. It may well be we have nothing to lose by joining, but let's make sure we have nothing to lose. But what do we have to gain? I mean, when you waive this intellectual property rights, who will take advantage of that? I do not believe, and I have never believed, that this will give us an opportunity to develop our own manufacturing. Oh, please. We already had that and it never happened. So who will gain from this? We know India has a tremendous manufacturing capacity for pharma. So India will gain. South Africa is a major industrial power. What about the rest of us? What else do we have to gain? What if they decide instead to sell to Europe again? Just like the Europeans have decided to sell to themselves, what happens if India decides to sell to Europe also? That's all.
Yes, thank you, Secretary Locsin. Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes. Go ahead.
Attorney Tony or Joseph Puruganan are online again. Well, what I could add to the line of inquiry of Sec Locsin, aside from India and Africa, who indeed initiated this proposal, as Attorney Tony said earlier, there are more than 100 countries who have already signed on as well to the proposal. And probably the majority of these will not gain in terms of maybe a more flexible markets for their pharmaceutical products, but the immediate good what would be in it for us if government decides to support the proposal is then even more flexibility in accessing these vaccines, vaccinating the necessary minimum percentage of our population, and achieving or approaching herd immunity more unencumbered by the provisions of the TRIPS and even of our national or the national intellectual property laws of the different manufacturing countries. Wala naman pong ina-anticipate dito, Mr. Chair, in the proposal about immediately ramping up domestic production capacities. That's somewhere down the road yet, manufacturing. It's really for being able to access, procure, or buy what we need right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but if andyan na yung andyan na yung sila Attorney Salvador. Kung wala,
Attorney Tony or si Joseph Puruganan, Mr. Chair.
I commit
Nandyan po, sir.
Ontiveros that we will rehear this item 2 weeks from now. Kasi I hope may developments na by that time, and then by that time the committee will now take a position on the resolution on PS 560, whether to on the proper disposition of the resolution. But siguro we most likely we will submit this to the plenary so that the members of the Senate can also weigh in on the subject matter, and then we will be discussing the merits of the India-South Africa reso, maybe as amended na by then, and then we'll come up with our own recommendation to the executive branch. Ganun na mangyayari as a body.
Maraming salamat.
Yes. But I'm just asking for 2 weeks so that
maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair.
We can gather the position papers, study this. We need to consult some international trade law experts regarding the points raised by Senator Marcos.
I welcome that, Mr. Chair, and thank the Chair very much po. Nakikita ko na rin po si Attorney Tony, Chair. Baka meron silang bilin sa atin.
Attorney Salvador, can you keep it short na, sir? Keep it brief.
Yes.
This is not the end of the we will just suspend this subject matter. Sige, go ahead, sir.
Yes, Your Honor. Hingi lang kami ng permission para mag-submit din ng position paper. Siguro hindi ko na uulitin yung mga sinabi ko kanina. Except, yung tungkol sa Article 73, yung security exception. Ang problema lang kasi, syempre, ma-open pa tayo pag in-invoke natin yung ma-open pa tayo sa litigation sa loob ng WTO. Of course, we don't want that to happen. At yun lang siguro, Your Honor.
Tsaka malabo yun kung
Thank you so much.
Malabo yun kung tayo lang gumamit nun, di ba?
Yes, Your Honor.
Of all the countries in the world, tayo lang nagsabi na security implication. Anyway, also, what's the name of your group, sir? Also submit your siguro position paper elaborating on the statement that you read, if you like to. Okay.
Yes, please, Your Honor. We are from the Third World Network, but
Third World Network.
yeah, we are coordinating a coalition of different organizations like Women Health, etc.
Okay. So if there are no more comments on that particular resolution, we will defer, suspend the hearing, and in 2 weeks' time, we will revisit the issue. Okay, so we're now down to our last 2 items. PS Resolution 369 concerning the ecologically destructive activities in the West Philippine Sea, and the privileged speech of Senator Tolentino. The PS Resolution 369 filed by Senator Ontiveros. And then we'll tackle the privileged speech of Senator Tolentino on the new China Coast Guard law. But since these 2 topics are so-called sensitive, if there is no objection, we can go into executive session. Secretary Locsin, is that okay with you? Okay, so Committee Secretary, how much time do you need to switch us to executive session?
Sir, we just need a few minutes po to transfer everybody to the breakout room.
Do we need to log off kami or just
No, sir, you just click on the join button when you see it.
Okay, so Philippine Coast Guard, be present. PNP Chief is still online. We expect him to be there. Yeah, sino pa ba? Sino pa?
PND,
Okay, sige,
DNR,
Yeah, okay. So I think the committee secretary has already a list now of who to invite. Sige, go ahead. So for the rest, for those of you who will not be joining us in the executive session, maraming salamat po sa participation po ninyo. Okay, we will see you in future hearings of the Foreign Relations Committee. Maraming salamat sa participation, and then see you later for those in the executive session. Go ahead, Secretary.
Yes, sir. We need the Philippine Coast Guard, the National Coast Watch, the DND, DNR, DFA, of course. Sir, we just need to know from the DFA kung sino po yung sasama.
Okay, Secretary. Secretary, of course, Secretary Maxine, of course. Oh,
Yes.
and then, of course, but in the DFA, they're so used to secrecy na. Anyway, we should not be so worried about who in the DFA will be joining. As long as the secretary is there, let the others join. They're bound to secrecy, and they know what to do.
They'll just sign off.
Mr. Chair, what about the PNP Maritime Command?
Well,
Yes.
yes. Okay.
PNP Chief and the Maritime Command. Okay. Please,
The Chinese.
switch us now. Switch us.
Checking if the Maritime Command and other people are on
Okay, we will be switched to a different room. Okay.
executive session.
Mr. Chair, this is Pia. It's still here, no? So just want the ComSec to also send me the join link.
Who's this one on the left?
Senator Pia is joining us.
This one.
The one below you.
Yeah.